These are 9 thrifty plant ideas that allow you to beat the recession and save some cash when caring for your houseplants. The more plants you add to your collection, the more pots and planters you need to put them in so that they look nice in your home. The problem is though that these pots and planters can be pretty expensive, especially if we're buying pretty decorative ones with nice patterns and colours. A thrifty tip then is to reuse the things in our home that we are about to chuck out as planters for our houseplants. Used jam jars are absolutely perfect. They're often a nice shape and look great with a pretty plant potted inside. They are see-through as well, so you can easily keep an eye on the root development as it grows. I've used lots of things around my home that I wasn't really using anymore as planters, and it really allows you to be creative with your plants. One of my favourites is repurposing a retro style coffee cup as a pot for my peperomia hope cutting that's happily living on my kitchen windowsill. If you're concerned about there being no drainage holes, then all we need to do is keep an eye on the watering and only water when the soil is dry. Let me know in the comments about your repurposed DIY planters. I'm always looking out for fresh ideas. Did you know that you can grow a rose bush from the bunch of roses that your husband or wife gives you on Valentine's Day? You might assume that once a rose stem is cut away from the plant, all you can do is watch it slowly die in a vase. But propagating your cut rose stems can be a fantastic thrifty way to get a new plant for free, as long as you have a little patience. All we need to do is sacrifice a couple of stems from our bouquet, choose one or two that still have some leaves on the stem, as well as the flower. Cut the flower off the stem. We don't want to keep this on because it will draw up too much water and the stem won't be able to grow roots. Make a fresh cut at the bottom of the stem just underneath a leaf node. You want your stem to be a few inches in length with a good single petiole attached with a couple of leaves. If there are more than a couple of leaves, then cut these off so that you only have 2. Lots of leaves means lots of water evaporation, which is not good for rooting cuttings. Pop the cuttings in a glass of water and place it in a bright spot in your home, and you should start to see roots develop within a few weeks. You can then pot them on into some soil and watch new stems develop and turn into a rose bush. Propagating plants is a fantastic way to increase the amount of plants you have in your home for free. I've propagated my jade plant countless times, and I've got them dotted all around my house, and jade plants are surprisingly easy to propagate. One of the best ways to root cuttings is to water propagate, but problems can arise when trying to keep the leaves on the cutting out of the water to prevent rot and propagation failure. A nifty technique that I've recently discovered is to take a standard kitchen sponge and use it as a hydroponic platform to insert my plant cuttings. Take a sponge from your kitchen. If the sponge is thick, then you may want to cut it in half lengthwise so you have less material to work with for your cuttings. Grab a skewer or something similar and poke holes through the sponge. The hole should be big enough for the stem of the plant you're propagating to poke through. Take your cuttings from your plant as you normally would and insert into the holes in the sponge. You can now take a tray or dish and fill it with water and place your sponge with the cuttings in on top so it floats. You should end up with a sponge sitting on top of a tray of water with cuttings poking through to the water where it will develop roots. The great thing is that leaves will be kept out of the way from the water by the sponge, and you can easily see the progress of root development by picking up the sponge. When roots have arrived, simply cut away the sponge and pot up as you normally would. Some plants grow a single central stem with leaves sprouting off, such as the Chinese money plant or ficus plants. And when they get taller, they sometimes have a tendency to lean over as they search for the light. This is really common with Chinese money plants, and we can end up with a crooked looking central stem, as a few of mine have recently developed. It's therefore beneficial to support their growth with a stake, and a thrifty solution I always use is to repurpose the disposable chopsticks you get from your local Asian takeaway as plant stakes, rather than chucking them out. These are perfect for little plants that need a little extra support to stop them flopping over. Just stick it into the soil next to the stem and loosely tie the stem to it with some string. I recently used it to support my small Peperomia obtusifolia that began to lean over as it was growing taller. It straightened the plant up nicely, and it's great that I've been able to use a free solution that would otherwise go to landfill. This next thrifty idea is perfect if you have a ZZ plant, Peperomia, or succulents and would like to grow more of them yourself for free. You may have already propagated these plants from stem cuttings, but did you know these plants can also be rooted from just the leaf? So instead of taking a stem cutting from a ZZ plant and only making one plant, remove all the leaves and propagate them all to make tons more ZZ plants. You can propagate the leaves in much the same way as the stems. My favourite way is to use a perlite propagation box, but they will root just as well in water. Just cover the end that was attached to the stem with your rooting medium and you're good to go. Be patient though, because they are a bit slower to develop roots than stem cuttings. You're getting lots more bang for your buck, so it's worth the extra patience. This method of propagation works excellently for jade plants as well as succulents such as echeverias. You can take a stem cutting, remove the leaves, and then place on a container filled with soil, making sure that the ends that were attached to the stem are covered in soil. It always amazes me to see roots sprout within a few weeks and then little plants develop at the end of these leaves. Let me know in the comments which plants you've propagated through leaf cuttings. I'll be interested to know if I'm missing an opportunity with any of the plants that I have. One of the best thrifty plant ideas we can implement is reusing plastic takeaway boxes as containers or propagation boxes. I'm a big fan of making use of items that would otherwise go to landfill, and these takeaway boxes comes in various shapes and sizes. We can fill these containers with potting soil, add some plant cuttings, and when we put the lid on, we have created the perfect propagation environment with high humidity. It doesn't just have to be takeaway boxes either. You can repurpose used yogurt pots as nursery pots for plants. All you need to do is make a hole in the bottom so that excess water can escape. Using these items is a great alternative to buying expensive nursery pots from your local store. Rooting hormone can really speed up the rooting process for your indoor tropical plant cuttings, but can be quite expensive when you buy it at your local garden centre. A simple solution that is much cheaper is to use honey or cinnamon powder as a natural rooting hormone. Honey works as a rooting hormone because it has antibacterial and antifungal properties that protects the cuttings from pathogens that then allows the natural rooting hormones in the cuttings to stimulate root growth. So take your cuttings, dip the ends into some honey and plant in soil like you normally would. The success rate will be higher and you should have roots much quicker. Cinnamon can also be used as a fantastic rooting powder for plant cuttings. This is because cinnamon also has antifungal properties which protects the open wound on the stem from developing rot and mould, which then allows the natural rooting hormones in the stem to develop roots. Take cuttings from a plant as you normally would, and dip the cut end into some cinnamon powder and plant up as you normally would. You'll see rot developing on the cut stems far less frequently, thereby increasing the success rate of your cuttings. You might have a plant that you have successfully propagated and has already developed roots and is starting to grow stems, and you probably want to protect your baby until it grows out into a full plant that can stand on its own 2 feet. In these cases, keeping the young plant in a spot with high humidity will really help. I find this is particularly the case with young jade plants that I grow from leaf cuttings, as I mentioned earlier. They often need to be nurtured to a bigger size. You can buy humidity domes in your local hardware store or online, but a thrifty alternative is to use clear Ziploc plastic bags, the ones you'd use for your sandwiches in your lunchbox, that you can cover your baby plant with. Grab your plant in its pot and place the bag over, fasten the zip so there's relatively tight seal around the pot, and you're done. You'll start to see condensation build on the inside of the bag, and this is when you know it's working. Take the bag off the plant every few days to allow air to circulate and prevent mould developing. Do you fancy growing your own pepper plant? Well, the next time you buy a pepper from the store and cut it in half, instead of throwing the seeds in the bin, save them and plant them up into some potting soil. This is a thrifty way to grow pepper plants for free without having to buy seeds from the garden centre. Seed starting peppers is best done in springtime unless you have a handy grow light you can hover over them. Use one of the takeaway containers I mentioned earlier as a propagation box, add some soil and make a trench for the seeds. Add the seeds, water them in, and you should be able to develop seedlings pretty easily within a couple of weeks. Keep the box in a bright spot and take the top off every once in a while to allow air to circulate and prevent mould. Once your seedlings have grown a couple of inches, pot them up into their own pots and nurture them until they're ready to be put outside if you have the space. And you'll have peppers in no time. I found this to be a nice little activity to do with the kids. For 9 ridiculously simple hacks that plant experts use, including an ingenious new way to repot your plant, then make sure you click on the link here so you don't miss out.